Hi everyone, hope you're doing good. Welcome to the next video on my YouTube channel. My name is Saurabh Bharti, Microsoft Dynamics 365 professional. This is my YouTube channel where I come and share my knowledge and experience with you all. So without further delay, let's start today's topic. So today's video is the continuation of our functional consultant series where I'm talking about all the necessary activities or the skills or the fundamentals which we need to be aware about as a functional consultant apart from the product knowledge. So today's topic is all about a very critical exercise or the analysis which every functional consultant needs to perform. So which is fit gap analysis. So we are going to talk about this. So let's start with this. So if you have been following this series, we are talking about this fit gap analysis as part of one of the major process, which is your requirement gathering process. And we have categorized this process into different phases. We have talked about that how do you prepare for the requirement gathering process. So these are the things which key principle, questionnaire, workshop, PowerPoint, require business process catalog, requirement traceability matrix or Azure DevOps, understanding of Azure DevOps. All these things we have covered as part of the preparation part. Then last video we spoke about gathering and documenting the requirement, where we talked about how do you gather the requirement, the key activities, the approach, how do you conduct the workshop, what are the type of questions you should ask for gathering the requirement, and the documentation. Now the last part is the sign off, but before you get into the sign off stage with the stakeholders, you also need to perform the analysis on your requirements, and one of the analysis which you perform on your requirement is the fit gap analysis. So we are going to talk about that. Quick recap, the last part of the last video was the documentation, the output. So as a prerequisite for your fit gap analysis, you should have captured your requirements and the details from your gathering process or from your workshop into your Azure DevOps. Or if you are not using that, then you should at least maintain an Excel spreadsheet, which you can call it as requirement traceability matrix. You should have your minutes from the workshop, right? So all these things should be available with you so that you have enough information to perform this particular analysis. So let's start with the fit gap analysis. What we need to do in this particular exercise. So the first thing is, what is fit gap analysis? So a fit gap analysis identifies the difference between the known requirement and the proposed or the current solution. It shows you the element that are missing from your solution so that you can address it. And to accomplish this task, you need to fully understand the requirements and analyze the moving parts of your proposed solution. In a very simple language, if I say anything, what will be the fit? So any requirement which can be met using the out of the box feature or an alternative solution using the out of the box feature in D365 or the application which you are using can be marked as fit. If any requirement require custom development in terms of feature development, report, or the integration, that requirement will be considered as a gap. Now let's understand this with one example. If you see this, we have a normal procure to pay process. So let's say if it starts with creating a purchase order, releasing the purchase order, receiving the purchase order, invoicing the purchase order, and ends. So if this is the process which customer wants, then it will be fit for you. But let's say customer says that there is one requirement where when we are receiving the PO, so the receiving of PO with a custom label or the extension, it should be done. Then that particular requirement is, let's say, not available in D365. application, then that requirement we have to mark it as a gap. So we need to understand the requirement very clearly to mark this as a fit or gap. So hope this helps you to understand what is the fit gap analysis, or why it is required. Now, whenever we are talking about a fit gap analysis and we are identifying any gap or any requirement as a gap, right? The it may vary, because I mean it can have an impact on different factors, or it can be influenced. It can influence multiple things, and majorly the reasons it can influence is the time, budget, and the resources. So these are the common influences for any gaps which we identify as part of our fit gap analysis. And we can understand this with the one of the example, or one of the concept, which is called as trade-off triangle, where this triangle has the three things, which is scope, resource, and the schedule. All are very critical aspect of our project when we are implementing. So if with this triangle, there it is having a very simple rule that if one side changes, one side changes, at least one other side must also change. So if you have a gap which is impacting your scope, then it cannot be managed alone. You need to either change your schedule, it will impact your schedule, or you need to add more resources. And similarly, like if you are let's say if you are changing your schedule, basically, let's say if you were supposed to complete this in next 3 months, and if you are reducing the schedule, or by let's say 1 month to making it 2 months, then you need to either reduce your scope or add more resources. So any change in any of this one side will at least have an impact on one other side. So that is called as trade-off triangle. And when you are doing the fit gap analysis, we need to keep in mind these factors, like you need to understand the time which you have it, the budget which you have it, and the resources which you have it. Okay, let's move on. Now when we are doing the fit gap analysis, there are few exercise which we need to do. So as a prerequisite, I am assuming that we have all the requirement listed as part of our Azure DevOps, and all the requirements are listed there. Now before we mark any requirement as a fit or a gap, we need to also explore the feasibility of the requirement. So throughout the process of collecting requirements, you should always ensure that requirements are feasible. As you perform the fit gap analysis and review each of the requirement, it's a good time to double check the feasibility. Determine that the requirement has a feasibility challenge should result in it being re-evaluated with the subject matter expert, or possibly deprioritize that. So we need to understand whether this requirement is actually feasible or not. Now, when you are doing this feasibility analysis of your requirement, you also need to ask few questions, or the few things which you need to consider, that who will use this requirement, right? Who is the stakeholder? Understand the technical feasibility, which is whether it is technically possible or not, using the platform which you are using. Impacted processes. What are the processes are getting impacted due to this requirement? And also validate the requirement with some experts or the auditors in case of, let's say, it is a financial requirement, so that later on the designed solution, let's say if you design a solution but later on it is having the compliance issue or the regulatory issues. So it is good to check the feasibility of your requirement before you mark that as a fit or gap, so that you can identify whether it's a valid requirement or not. The next part of validating your requirement or identifying that is your requirement is valid or not is you can refine your requirement from the proof of concept insights. So proof of concept is a mechanism where you take your requirement and do a proof of concept with your designed solution or proposed solution. I won't say the design because it is still not designed. You just collected the requirement, but as an application consultant or functional consultant, you have a sense that which functionality or feature you are going to use in the system to meet that requirement. So you can do a proof of concept. And why it is required? Because all the requirements which you have gathered are not necessary or are valid. Why it is not valid? Because when you gather the requirements, some requirements can be influenced by the existing system or the technology being used by the customer. So customer might say that I need this because I have this in my current system, but it is not necessary that the solution, the to be solution which you are proposing, will have the similar requirement. It helps you to validate the user journey as well, that how your user journey is going to look like to meet your requirements. Helps you in design phase as well, so that if you are sure that these requirements are the valid requirement, you will be able to design your solution, a robust solution for the customer. So you should conduct a proof of concept. You might find that the gather requirements is not at all required, or also you might see that as a result of the proof of concept, that the requirement which were marked as the complex requirement, which you were thinking as a complex requirement, might turn down to a less complex requirement. So before you start your fit gap analysis, it is very important to understand or refine your requirements using the early proof of concepts and also the feasibility check. Once you are done with this, we assume that you have all your requirements which are valid and which are within your scope of the project. And now time comes where you mark that as a fit or gap. Now, when we say fit or gap, we have understood the definition of fit and gap. Anything which is possible out of the box or using an alternative solution can be marked as fit, and anything which requires a custom development, which means in terms of reports, integration or feature, can be marked as a gap. But when we are marking any requirement as a gap, we need to also consider certain other factors, or we need to capture certain attribute so that we can plan all these requirements, implementation, and design our solution being in the scope, on time, and not impacting our resource schedule. Okay, so remember the trade-off triangle which we have spoken about. So we need to consider that, like any of the requirement where we are performing the fit gap is not impacting any of those vertical. If it is impacting any of those sides, we need to make the change in the at least one of the side other two side. So when you are reviewing your requirement, you should mark them as a fit or gap, yes or no. You need to also, if it is a gap, then you should specify the severity of the gap, the complexity. You should also define the MOSCO category for your requirement. It is a must have, should have, could have, would have, so that you can understand that when you are going live, what is the day one requirement or the MVPs for you. The category of the gap, basically, so it is a report, function, integration, what type of the category this particular gap is falling. So majorly this analysis and these attributes are important to capture in terms of if we find any requirement as a gap. If it is a fit, you can mark these attributes, but it is not that critical, because as part of the implementation and the solution design, we are assuming all the fit will be considered in that particular process. If it is a gap, that means we need extra effort for implementing the solution. Then you do the prioritization of your gap. What's the priority of that gap? Along with the prioritization, if you have marked anything as a gap, you also need to understand and evaluate, is there a workaround available for that? If yes, then what is the impact? Will it require change in the process? And also last is the effort required to implement that particular gap. So it is very important when you are doing the fit gap analysis, marking your requirement and categorizing your requirement in fit or the gap. For all the gaps, you define all these attributes. At least you might have more attributes to be captured, depends on your situation and the process or the methodology you are following. Now, when you are doing the fit gap analysis, you might consider certain factors, because when you are marking anything as a gap, you also think in your mind that how that gap can be fulfilled. Is there a way of is there a way of achieving this using any Dynamics 365 app? So for example, if I am having a requirement of capturing the lead, sales lead or quotation or anything, is it possible that we can utilize some feature from the Dynamics customer engagement along with the finance and operation? Is there any third-party app which is available to fulfill that gap? So let's say if I need something for taxation purpose or regulatory purpose, is there any other third-party app available for me? Earlier, let's say we had one requirement in accounts payable, which was like invoice capturing, like OCR. It was not available in D365. So is the what are the ISV solutions available for meeting that requirement? And also the third one is that, is there an alternative solution within the application which is available to fill that gap? So when you are defining the gap, apart from capturing these attributes, it is very important that you also understand that how these gaps can be fulfilled apart from the extension or the development which you will do within the Microsoft Dynamics 365 application. Last but not the least is your all these information ideally as a methodology. I think you should use the Azure DevOps for updating all these information. So there should be a work item type of requirement or the user story, depending what your methodology allows you to do, and you capture all these things in your Azure DevOps. If it is a very small scale implementation or the project, and if you are not using Azure DevOps, definitely you must be maintaining some Excel tracker in terms of the requirement traceability metrics. So that's it for this video. Hope this helps you to understand the fit gap analysis process, how you should perform, what you should consider, what are the factors, how do you identify your valid requirement before you start your fit gap analysis. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we will be talking about how do you document and present it to your customer or the stakeholder, and then take the sign off. And after that, we will be also talking about how do you design these gaps and how do you write the document, functional design document for any gaps which you have identified. So thank you for watching this, and see you in the next one. Take care.